Hey y'all, welcome to Remote Viewing Investigations with Jessica. I'm your host, Jessica Jones. We'll be peering through the veil to shed light on mysterious cases from all over the world. We invite you to join us on this magnificent journey through space and time to try to unravel these mysteries. Please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, share this out, and subscribe to Texas Front Porch and to my channel, The Cryptid Huntress on YouTube. You can find us on Odyssey Radio and iHeartRadio and can contact us at Texas Front Porch on Facebook or email us at paracryptidencounters@gmail.com and oracleofthesouth@gmail.com. You can reach us through text at 972-559-0988. If you'd like to support us in what we do here, our super chats are open. Thanks and enjoy the show. Well, hello and welcome in to Remote Viewing Investigations. I'm your host, Jessica Jones, and I have a really awesome show for you guys tonight. I know I have on a big hat. Tanya just told me I'm the Southern Belle Witch. Okay. I know it's a lot, y'all. It's a lot. So anyways, yeah, we have both remote viewed the Salem witch trials for tonight. And we have a very interesting show for you guys. It actually is very sad what happened back in the 1600s here in North America, in Salem, Massachusetts. Okay. And I want to thank everybody for being here tonight and for joining us. This is our Halloween special tonight. And so I'm going to get right to this because we have a lot to talk about this evening. And so let me give you a little rundown before I bring Tanya up. All right. So between February 1692 and May of 1693, the deadliest witch hunt in colonial North America took place in Salem, Massachusetts. A series of hearings were held where 200 people, actually over 200 people, were accused of witchcraft. 30 people were found guilty, 19 were executed by hanging, 14 women and 5 men, and 1 man was pressed to death, and 5 others died in jail. Mass hysteria broke out in the Salem area as terrified Puritans believed the devil had made his presence known in the town. Neighbor accused neighbor, and family members turned on each other with accusations of witchcraft. But just as quickly as it began, it ended. Puritan officials eventually came to their senses and halted the trials. Records were sealed, and any writing or publicizing of the trials were banned. Books and records were burned. Some say it was the first large government cover-up in American history, used to hide the prosecution and execution of innocent people. Well, my co-host tonight, my special guest, Tanya Braddock, is here. And so let me give her a formal introduction tonight. Tanya is an intuitive empath specialized in quantum healing, hypnosis, EFT tapping, and the emotion code, where she deep dives into the subconscious mind to assist and teach people how to tap into their own inner healing naturally and intuitively. She hosts the Existential Empath podcast, where she shares tips and techniques on how to strengthen one's intuitive gifts to allow major shifts in consciousness to take place. She worked in the healthcare field for nearly 15 years, where she experienced many paranormal experiences, which opened her up to understanding her abilities on a much deeper level. She's also a Sasquatch and ET experiencer and has participated in CE5 events in Washington and North Idaho. She has the ability to activate people in their own knowledge of light language to assist with elevating one's consciousness. All right, so I'm going to bring Tanya up, my witchy partner tonight. Hey, Tanya. Oh my gosh.
I'm like a broke down witch. Like I'm like
Oh my gosh, I love your cricket hat though. You got the cricket hat, and I know. I look like I just left a funeral, or I'm going to one. So it's not very often we get to wear a witch hat. So
exactly.
Yes. Well, Tanya, I got to tell you, this remote viewing target really affected me. It was very sad, and I believe especially through all my data, a lot of innocent lives were lost over this. What kind of feeling did you get from all of this?
No, absolutely. And, as part of my quantum healing hypnotherapy, I've had several clients that the witch trials have come up, both Salem and the European witch trials. So oftentimes we're holding a lot of this trauma within us from our past lives. And so absolutely, I was sensing that as well, just connecting. And it was very sad, but yet kind of angry at the same time. It was like just really angered that many people were accused as they were for practically doing nothing or, just being themselves,
Yeah, it was literally a witch hunt. Okay, literally a witch hunt, and so many people lost their lives. Now, I don't know. Maybe should we get into the history first, or should we do the data? What do you think? What kind of path do you think we should take tonight?
Let's do the history, then we'll do the data, and then we can chat about the other stuff we have.
Okay. All right. Well, let me get my notes out because I have my remote viewing data here, and let me check the chat real quick because I know we have a lot of people in here. Okay. And as I can, I'm going to be pulling up some chat, and I'm sure people may have questions for us tonight. And yeah, everybody, I've really been looking forward to this week, Tanya. So thank you for joining me.
Sure.
Here. Okay. So back in 1692 in February, there were two young girls, Elizabeth Parris and Abigail Williams, who were around 11 years old. They started having fits. Okay. Is what they called it. Fits. And, yeah, their behavior started getting mimicked by other girls. And Elizabeth Hubbard and Ann Putnam, these girls were the daughter and niece to Reverend Parris. Now, Reverend Parris has a big thing to do with all of this. Okay, he was one of the heads that were kind of accusing people, I believe, of being witches. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, Salem was deeply divided. Okay, deeply divided. And I believe I have a picture here of a map that we can look at that will show everybody kind of how the area was divided. Let's see. Well, I thought I pulled it up. You know what? I must not have pulled the picture up. I'm sorry, but there I have it. I have it on my computer. I just forgot to put it in here today. So there was it was deeply divided. So there were farmers in the northern part of Massachusetts called Salem Village. These people thought they were morally superior to the other people who lived around the village. And there were also merchants down in the south called Salem Town. And let's see, in the north, Samuel Parris, okay, Reverend Parris, was the devout Christian leader and a Puritan minister. He wanted complete Puritan lifestyles there, okay? And that's, yeah, definitely no witchcraft, okay? No witchcraft. He saw witchcraft as the largest threat to the village because it occurred with the help from the devil, Tanya. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine? Those people must have been scared to death. Okay.
It sounds like they were terrified.
Yeah. And the Native Americans, the natives there, sometimes would attack their villages. And so, of course, they accuse them of being devil worshipers. Okay. And Anglicans and Quakers were becoming influential too. And of course, those were devil worshipers to them as well.
Yeah. You know what's funny, Jessica? In my research, I actually researched that witches, pagans, the pagan witches actually don't even believe in the devil. So this was kind of a funny, thing that they were being accused of, having a correlation with the devil when in reality, they didn't even really believe in it.
I know. A lot of this doesn't really make sense. I mean, I guess hindsight's 2020. We're living in 2022 looking back at this. Mm-hmm. But, they didn't have access to the internet back then.
Probably a good thing.
They didn't have TVs and radio or anything. So, they had each other to entertain. Okay. And that's about it. And their farm animals and stuff like that. So, okay, rumors of these girls having fits started spreading around, and it was very alarming. Okay, so they started accusing women of witchcraft. Okay, and I know I'm kind of skipping some of this stuff because there's a backstory with what is the lady's name? Tituba, I believe. And we're going to get into that in just a minute. Okay. But the rumors started spreading about these girls having these fits, and they started accusing people of witchcraft. Okay. That they were having these fits because there were people practicing witchcraft around the village. The first three people who were accused of witchcraft were Sarah Good. Okay. She was very unpopular with her town, by the way. She was hated by her husband. Oh, imagine that. And she was forced to beg and to live off of breadcrumbs and stuff to survive. And so people didn't really like her very much. Also, a lady named Sarah Osborne was one of the first to be accused, and she had shocked the whole village a few years prior to her being accused, because after her husband died, she married an indentured servant.
Oh, that's okay. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And the people who were executors over her husband's estate, the Putnams, they didn't like her very much because she had married an indentured servant. Okay. Well, the third person that was accused was Tituba. Okay. And she was a West Indian slave. She had actually baked a cake. Okay,
Yes.
a poison cake, kind of, and it contained the urine of one of the little girls who had been affected, who wasn't having fits, rind meal, whatever that is, ashes, and she fed the cake to a dog. The point was, if you feed this cake to a dog, it's kind of got a little voodoo background to it, I guess.
Uh-huh.
And if you fed this cake to the dog, a witch, wherever the witch was, she would start having seizures or seize up, and that's when you could identify who the witch was. Okay. But she was interrogated. She confessed to witchcraft ultimately. And she named Sarah Osborne and Sarah Good as being her co-conspirators.
Interesting. Okay. And Sarah Good's daughter, Dorothy Good, who was 4 years old, was also accused of witchcraft as well. A 4-year-old. Yeah.
Well, a lot of these people were beaten and tortured. And they faced execution. So they started telling on other people. Now, whether those people were actually witches or not, we're going to get to that with our remote viewing data. Okay.
Exactly.
But she was not executed. She actually got off with her life. Mm-hmm. Okay. But the other two women did die. Sarah Good was hanged on July the 19th. And Sarah Osborne, she died in jail on May the 10th. Okay. Of that year. So, yeah. The governor eventually of Massachusetts, William Phipps, he appointed a special counsel to the court called Court of Oyster and Terminer, okay, to handle all these allegations. And in June, William Stoughton headed it, and he was the head judge. He started allowing spectral evidence.
Yes. And that came up in my remote viewing. And I was like, what is that? I had never heard of it before.
Yeah. Well, spectral evidence, that's just where you can say that somebody's ghost came and attacked you. And let me tell you, if you got accused of being, with the spectral evidence, there was no getting out of it. Like, you were basically executed at that point because you could not disprove that. Yeah, and it wasn't fair.
It's not fair. It's like someone has a dream about you, and that could be considered spectral evidence, because someone's spirit would appear in a dream when their body was in another location.
Yes, exactly. So anybody can be accused of this stuff. And
Jessica, you and I were accused, obviously, with our remote viewing skills.
Well, yeah, we're absolutely. We definitely we would have been executed back then, no doubt. There's absolutely no doubt. Remote viewing, being psychic.
I think I was a runner. I probably ran.
Yeah, I mean, even just being a strong woman too. I mean, I'm sure a lot of these women, if they back talk their husbands, they were going to get hung. So it's
Yeah, basically, if you didn't wear the right thing, act the right way, do the right things, eat the right things, then you could have been accused from a variety of ways.
Exactly. That's right. Well, when they started allowing for the spectral evidence, obviously only the devil could do that. That was something the devil did. And so once you're accused, it's impossible to defend. Everyone was convicted that was accused of that for the most part. And witches were actually tested. When you were accused of being a witch, they would put you through a series of tests. Okay. And if you could pass these tests, they may or may not let you go. Now, one of those tests was called the prayer test. And you had to recite the Lord's Prayer with no mistakes, Tanya.
And no stuttering. Yep.
No backtracking, no nothing. You had to say it like a pro. or else.
And then there was the prick test too. So they claimed that when a devil and a witch made a pact with one another, the devil left an insensitive mark on the witch, which could have appeared as a mole or a birthmark. And what they would do is they would prick it. And if they didn't seem to react or respond to the pain, then they were considered a witch. And they also had what was known as the swimming witches or the swimming test. So if water would actually reject someone, I guess, who had been taken over by the devil or who had been doing witchcraft. And so they would try to see if they would float or if they would sink. And if they sank, they were innocent. But if they would float, they were considered a witch.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, back in we're going to also be talking about the European witch hunts, okay,
Yes.
as well. And those were the century before this. And, women were, and men too.
And men too. Someone asked that. It was men too. Yes.
Yeah. If you had a mole or a freckle on your body, that was considered you being a witch.
Yeah.
So, we'll get into that too here in just a little while. But,
you could be making some herbal tea and you would be considered a witch.
Anything that was healing, right?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
A lot of them were healers. A lot of these women and men who were accused were actually healers. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Well, let's get into what happened. Okay. Because we're going to get into this in a little more detail with our data. Okay. So 19 people ended up being hanged to death. 5 died in prison. And one man, Giles Corey, he was pressed to death. Okay. Now, Tanya, that's where they actually put like a board over your body and put rocks on top of it, right?
Huge rocks. And then they did it as a form of torture to get you to confess. Well, Giles got to a point where he was screaming more rocks, because he knew he was going to die and he wasn't confessing to something that he didn't believe that he had done. And so he was actually, basically suffocated. He was crushed. He was crushed to death and then ended up suffocating because he couldn't breathe with all of these heavy boulders, on his chest, which is a horrible, horrible way to die.
That is it's terrible. Well, these are all needless deaths in the end, because we're going to get into that in just a minute, which makes it even just so much more tragic. So the young girls that had been accusing everyone of witchcraft because they were having these fits, and it all stemmed from, is it Tituba? What is that her name?
Tituba.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they started just accusing a lot of people, and there's one main woman at the middle of this, and it was Ann Putnam Jr. She accused a lot of people of witchcraft. The vast majority of those convicted, and the vast majority of those that were executed, she had a hand in that.
Absolutely.
Okay. So around September, okay, this went on for months. Okay. And around September, the public started getting fed up. They were like, this is too much. It was a wild debacle. Everybody was getting, accused. There were hundreds of people in jail or being executed. Spectral evidence became questioned. Okay. People were like, all right, this is out of hand. The governor's wife was accused of witchcraft. Okay. So that, of course, it's always when somebody in power
when somebody
gets accused, then there's a problem.
Or a wife gets accused, then it's done.
Well, clergy members begged the governor to dissolve that court and replace it with one that doesn't allow for spectral evidence. Now, they didn't want to just get rid of it completely. They just wanted a court that didn't allow spectral evidence. Okay. But by May of 1693, a year after the trials began, they ended abruptly. Okay. Those in prison were pardoned and freed. 25 victims. Oh, did I say 25? I thought there was only 15. Or how many people got killed? I wrote 25 right here.
19.
It was 19, but well, I think there were maybe some more people died in jail.
Jail, you're right. Yeah, 19 were actually
executed.
Executed, and then there were some that died in jail.
Yeah. There were even babies that died in jail, newborn babies, because some of the women were pregnant.
Yeah.
There was at least one baby that died in jail. And so that's horrible as well. But many who accused the victims ended up regretting it, of course. And even Ann Putnam Jr. apologized and professed the innocence of all those victims. So she felt bad afterwards, of course. But in May of 2022, I guess the Massachusetts government decided to exonerate the last. 2022. They finally exonerated the last of the witches. Okay, that weren't actually witches. which is ridiculous. Okay. But at least, I guess, at least they were recognized. Okay.
Yeah, I guess.
So, yeah, I guess so. Very tragic that happened. Thank you, everybody. Tanya and I are loving our hats tonight. Y'all are really sweet. It is Halloween. So, okay. So with my data, let's just get into the data real quick.
Let's get into the data. So that's the history.
We have so much more to talk about. So with my data, I 100% picked up. It was all innocent people were murdered, basically.
Yep. False accusations is what I got.
False accusations. Yep. I got a lot of the accusers were the guilty ones.
Yep, okay? Pointing the finger.
I got that. There was no witchcraft involved with any of this. I didn't even pick up Tituba was doing voodoo or anything. I didn't pick up on that.
She was doing oracle cards. Yeah, she was doing tarot cards.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, it was spiritual warfare, basically, is what that was, and people were being scapegoated. I picked up on property deeds were involved and things like that. So I was picking up on a property aspect, like people were jealous of people or mad because they had done bad property deals and things like that, and so they were just pointing fingers. It was also a big show, and these girls, these young women, were getting a lot of attention. And so it was actually working out kind of well for them because they were getting attention they wouldn't normally get. And I was picking up on that as well. But it was enemies were being eradicated is what I literally picked up in the data. Enemies were being eradicated.
Yeah. Okay. And a lot of, I got corruption and I got the purge actually is what I got. It was like a purge. It was a purging of those that, because they were accusing those, if you were poor, if you weren't married, if you lived outside of the town, or if you had, you just weren't valuable to them, then they were accusing you of that. And so I had gotten that it was a purge. It was like an olden time purge.
Yeah, I absolutely got that. I actually picked up on a human reset. Okay. And I know that's kind of a term that we hear a lot these days. And Tex. Yes, y'all, you got a witch on your team tonight, Tex. Okay. But yeah, I did pick up that it was like a human reset, and it was like a purge. It was getting rid of people that they didn't want. I mean, they had the intention of getting rid of a lot more people than they got rid of.
Absolutely. Okay. And Jessica, I had picked up that I had gotten the word loosh. So for those of you that know what loosh is, it's just a siphoning of energy. Yes. And so there was so much fear and chaos, and it was just out of control that they were actually siphoning the energy, the powers that be that were doing this. And I actually picked up on church as well. So the church had a lot to do with this too, that they were doing some things that they didn't want fingers pointed at them. So then they started to point their fingers at, back at those in the town and in the village.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was getting that people were following the lead. Okay. People were scared to go against the crowd. Okay. And
the herd mentality.
It's the herd mentality. And so once one person would point a finger, everybody started pointing fingers. Okay. And nobody was standing up for anybody unless you got accused. And then you either pointed a finger at somebody else to get out of it, or, and the people who ended up being executed, they stood by the fact that they were innocent, and they would not say that they were doing witchcraft. They said, no, absolutely not. The truth is more important than you getting a confession that's not true. Okay?
It's funny you say that, because I actually got hot potato. The game, I was visualizing that game Hot Potato, where you have the potato and then you pass it off and you hand it off and you hand it off because you don't want to be the one with a potato. And that's exactly the visual that I was getting. It was like, if one was getting accused, they were as rapidly as they could think of ways to accuse someone else to get the light, the limelight off of them.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't want fingers pointed at you if everybody's pointing, I mean, I actually have a great picture here to show tonight that's from The Crucible. Okay, this is a play that's about the Salem witch trials. And this is basically what it was like. Everybody's pointing fingers, and there wasn't a whole lot people could do about it unless you knew people in high places and could get a pardon from the governor, you were pretty much toast, literally.
Yeah.
When it came down to it. Okay, so yeah, as far as the remote viewing goes, I do my data is my personal data is in my Patreon. So shout out to all my Patreon members on here tonight. Thank you guys so much for all your support. My data and a bunch of more information is on Patreon today and tonight. So if anyone would like to join, hey, if y'all join Patreon, y'all wait for a couple of days. If you're not already a member, because they'll charge you twice. Okay, they charge the first of every month. So y'all wait until next week. Okay, to join. But I'd love to have y'all. Please do join. But yeah, there was a whole lot of guilt of people, and I think that people knew deep down in their soul that they were guilty of accusing innocent people all along. Okay, all along. But it was a mass psychosis kind of thing, mass hysteria, scapegoating, guilt by association, hiding the guilt. The accusers were the bad ones. I mean, that's what my data suggests. 100%. And a lot of people, a lot of very innocent lives were taken over this. Okay. So, and this, actually, I have some visuals to show the audience tonight, Tanya, of the enormous amount of people who were affected by this. Okay. So we have, these are the main accusers. Okay. So these are all young women for the most part. Okay. So we, that's a lot of women there. Okay. These are the girls who were afflicted, who had the fits, which were kind of like flailing around and their eyes rolling back in their heads, and they were shaking and all that kind of stuff. It could have been like a mass hysteria or something. I mean, it could have been something very psychological. But according to my data, it was just kind of a show.
Yeah, I didn't pick up that it was a virus or anything like a fungus. I know I had read that somewhere. I didn't pick up on any of that. I picked up more. It was just kind of psychological, psychological warfare a little bit, spiritual warfare. It was just
spiritual warfare.
Yeah, they were terrified. They were terrified that they were going to get accused and that they were going to be killed. So they would just, by any means possible, survival of the fittest, point the finger at whoever they could that they think would, take the finger off of them.
Yeah, it was hot potato. I like that. That's a great analogy, actually. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go to the next slide here. Okay. So those are the accusers. Now, there were other accusers as well. These included some of the people who confessed. So these people were accusers, but these are people who pointed the finger at other people when they were accused too. Okay. So a lot of people there. Okay. And these are the people who were executed. All right. A lot of them were executed in groups. Okay. The last day that people were actually executed, there was quite a few there. 1, 2, 3. Was that 7 or 8 on that last day?
And did you notice that was on the solstice?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, the 22nd there. So it's usually around the solstice time, which we know that's a ritual time. So that may come up
ritual.
Later.
Oh my gosh.
I had that come up. I had some of that come up in my reading so I remote viewed the Salem witch trials, but then I was guided to do the European witch trials. And I was picking up on a lot of ritual activity, specifically with the European witch trials, but not to say that wasn't what was going on in Salem, as well. So, and we all know that the solstices or the equinox, that was the equinox. The solstices and the equinoxes are big days, for that ritual activity.
Oh yeah. Wow. I mean, it goes back to the beginning of time. So why would it not be, relevant to all of this?
Exactly.
That's a great point. Okay. So we had the executed. Okay. So these are all the people who died in prison. Okay. A lot of people died in prison. People died in custody. And there were some people that were pardoned. Okay. Some people were pardoned by, like I said, if you knew the governor or somebody, maybe even one of the judges, they would pardon you. Okay. And, or perhaps if you confessed, who knows? But some people, I guess those are the people who pled guilty. So Tituba pled guilty and was pardoned. Okay, so the people who survived, okay, these are people who were not found guilty or otherwise survived the trial period. So some were released on bond. So if you could pay to get your family members out, there was one person that was able to do that. And then a whole bunch of people escaped. Okay, and I'm talking about ran. Okay, so they I don't blame them. I mean, it was
No.
pretty much you were going to die in jail or by being hanged if you didn't flee. So some of these people took off running and were able to escape.
Mhm.
I didn't know that aspect until I did my research on this.
Yeah, and if they had an animal, some of the animals were killed as well because when you look at witches, oftentimes they would have a familiar with them, which they thought that witches could shapeshift and turn into like a black cat or even a dog or, an animal. So if they were accused, they often would kill the animal as well because they thought that potentially it was a familiar.
Oh, now they cross the line.
I know.
No, it's terrible. That's just it just adds to the devastation of all of this, and so, some people died in prison waiting to be executed, I guess. One person died because they were found not guilty, but they couldn't get out of jail until their court fees were paid. So they ended up dying in jail. I mean, it had to have been really rough conditions. I'm sure they didn't have air conditioning or it was probably dirty. There's no telling. They were chained to the floor, and who knows? But there were babies born in these prisons. Okay, Mercy, the daughter of Sarah Good, she was born and died in prison right before her mother was executed, which is horrible. And then John, the son of Elizabeth Proctor and John Proctor, that baby was born in jail as well. And then a lot of people just died in prison. So before the trial, and a lot of them it was due to torture and mistreatment.
Yep.
Now there were people who were released from prison after the governor ended the witch trials abruptly. Mary Black, she was a slave who was arrested and indicted, never went to trial, and then a couple people were released after they had sat in jail for almost a year. Okay, and then people that were not indicted here, and then we have all the judges. Okay, that's a lot of judges and justices there.
And I don't see a single female on there. Do you?
Well, of course not. Women didn't have that right back then, So yeah, there's just a lot. Like I just wanted to show all the names so that the audience would get an idea of how many people were actually involved in all of this. And that was just in Salem. Okay, so
yeah, and so let's talk a little bit about I've had so I do past life regression. That's what I do. And when I first started learning about regression therapy, I actually was regressed. And when I was regressed, I went back to my time in Salem. And so I was not one of the ones who was hung or executed. However, I was one of the ones who was banished, and many were banished from the villages and the towns, and they were outcasts. And honestly, the ones who were banished went through tremendous heartache and pain because they were separated from their family and they were on their own. And so I was one back in that time. I was an apothecary. That's what I did. So I was one of the people, like a medicine woman. They would come to me and I would use herbal remedies and I would help heal people. Well, I was accused and then I was banished. I was shunned from the community. And what had happened is I had established myself outside of the community, and some of the members, the accusers, had actually come and found me late at night, and they tortured me and they beat me and then they buried me alive. So in my past life regression, in this life, I have had several times where I've had issues with claustrophobia or where I can't breathe or something along those lines. So I had asked that in my quantum healing hypnosis session, why do I struggle with claustrophobia so much? Like it's a big deal, for me. And it actually came back to that aspect of me being buried alive during the witch trials. And so many of us have had these past lives, whether we're in the European witch trials or or Salem. And so what comes up often with my clients when they bring up the witch trials, or it comes up, is our throats, our throat chakras. So many of us have a hard time speaking our truth. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that we have been hung. And I actually learned the other day from a gal who does regression therapy as well. She said, some of us actually have lines on our neck, and the more lines we have, we can count them. That's how many times we've been hung. And I'm like, well, that's a really interesting concept, because I've got 2 lines there. And I remember as a kid, I've always had those lines. So, that's a really, I had never heard that before. And I don't know if it's true or not, but I thought that was an interesting addition.
Well, I have some of those lines, so who knows? Yeah, that's terrible. It's frightening, but it's also very interesting too. Wow, that's pretty interesting, because I got very emotional when I was doing this target, and I've always felt some sort of connection to the witch trials. And I'm not sure if it's the American witch trials here or the European, probably more the European, because I feel more of a connection to the burning at the stake and things like that.
And that's more European.
Yes. So I do feel a connection. I think a lot of people, especially women, we do feel a connection to the spirit of this and to the energy of it, and some kind of some weird, interesting connection there. It's almost like we do have some sort of a lineage connected to that.
We do. And oftentimes, okay, so for me, for example, my senior year in high school, we took a trip to Boston, and one of the stops was Salem. And so we had toured the town, and I remember touring the town, and then we had gotten to the place where they had held the trials, and they had us all sit in a circle, and they would turn the lights off, and then they were going to share the story. Well, the minute I sat down in the circle, I started to have a panic attack. I could not breathe. I started to freak out. I started to I felt the energy of the location. Well, my teacher had to walk me out of the building, and I could not go back in that building at that time. It was like a fear or a terror had come over me. And now I understand I'm highly empathic. I was obviously picking up on whether it be my past lives at this location, or picking up on the actual energy, of those who had suffered the accusations. And because it was actually in the trial hall or the courthouse where I had this attack, happen. Wow. So I had my own personal experience there of just reliving some of the fear and some of the panic and anxiety that many of the people, during that time had actually experienced.
Yeah, it's really sad, but before, maybe 5 to 10 years ago, I would not have understood that connection. And and we'd wonder why we get anxiety for, even studying these things or looking into them. Well, maybe it was in a past life. I am a firm believer of reincarnation myself. That's my personal belief. Yeah. And I do feel a connection to all of this. I do. And I have some pictures that we can show as well, going back to the European witch trials and the witch hunt. I mean, that was back in the 15 to 1600s, I believe.
It actually dates all the way back to the 1300s, and it lasted a lot longer. They called it the Great Hunt, and 40,000 people died in the European witch hunts. And it was mostly in the areas of France, Germany, Scotland, and England mostly, but it did trickle out into some of the other countries there. But this was well before Salem. And there was a nice little time frame in between the European witch trials and Salem where nothing was going on. Well, at least that wasn't documented, that was going on. But during the European witch trials, there was a separation of the church, the Catholic Church. It separated from the Catholics and the Protestants. And at this time, they were looking for followers, both of them. So what I was picking up in my remote viewing data is that they were using this as fuel to gain more followers. So it was like, all right, the Catholic Church is saying, okay, you want to be Protestant? Well, we're going to accuse you of being a witch unless you switch over to be Catholic, and that there was just this, kind of push and pull going on to try and get more followers, to come to the church. But the people believed that the witch hunts protected them from Satan, and that the churches actually believed in burning demons and burning, they think of hell and the devil and fire. And so that's why the European witch trials, they were much more apt to burn at the stake, because it was more of a religious type accusations, or accusing of people, versus Salem, which was just more a village and a town, kind of accusing the people. It was more civil.
Yeah. Well, Tanya, so Jean was asking, can I explain what a witch is to everybody? Well, a witch is a different thing to everyone here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, according to the witch trials, a witch was just a person who, mostly a woman, but there were men too, that were accused of performing witchcraft and working with the devil. Okay. So working with demons and just having a relationship with the devil. Okay. But, of course, a witch could be anything. Some of us have been accused of being witches this lifetime. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
and it may follow some of us lifetime after lifetime, but I don't think that there's that much of of such a horrible connotation to it these days. I think that society is more open to women being healers and things, because a lot of times a witch is just a healer, someone who uses herbs and potions to heal people. And what do you say about that, Tanya?
Yeah, it's really just someone who knows how to tap into the universal energies, who knows how to use the elements, the earth, wind, fire, water, right? Ether, someone who can really tune into that. But, as we all know, the churches have misconstrued that, because they wanted to point fingers at, the pagans, and to try to manipulate and bring more people into the church. And so, if you go, dating back to, all the way back to that time, many of the pagans were tuned into the land, and that they used this energy, which is our chi, our prana, and that they were being accused of witchcraft, when really they were just utilizing universal energies. And that's what many of us are remembering, now during this great reset, or this great awakening.
Another reset, right? Yes. Well, I mean, and I would argue that, I like to read oracle cards and tarot cards and things. And I feel like I am a channel as well to for the divine in some, I guess always. And so just to bring messages down from source. And so I think that there's a connection to God. And so I think it gets really misconstrued. And also I did a show last week on Mahaley Lancaster, who is a famous fortune teller from here in Georgia, from Heard County. Okay. And she called herself the Biblical Oracle. Okay, biblical. And she was a devout Christian. And I think a lot of these, well, especially the people who were being accused of witches during Salem, during the trials, they were all devout Christians. Okay, but I think a lot of people who are in tune with the divine, with source, with God, using divination and things like that, seers, oracles, they were accused of being witches. Okay. And so if that's being a witch, then that's what a witch is.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, just tuning into your higher consciousness, that higher self, that God source energy, that creator energy. That's how you tap into the universal energies. It's just really being, connected. And the earth plays a huge role in that, and in our modern society, we've been highly disconnected, from that. But back then, that's all they had. That's all they, really could work with. They worked with plants and herbs and mushrooms and the water energy and all of that. And so they were just really, they had much more of a deeper understanding of the sun and the moon and, everything, because that's all they saw. That's all they knew. They didn't have televisions and smartphones and, all these distractions.
Exactly.
Like
they weren't taking selfies back then. Right. Yeah. But they were also looking for recognition and things like that. And that's why those girls went into all that hysteria and were getting that attention. And they were easily swayed by people who, people of power. Perhaps some say that they were being, people were whispering to them on to who to accuse next, go have your fit and, you'll get your 15 minutes of fame. Right. And people are still looking for that. through TikTok,
Absolutely.
Facebook and stuff,
Absolutely.
doing dumb things for fame and fortune. Okay. And not to say these girls got rich off of this or anything, but they did get attention where they might not have had attention before, in that kind of a case. Which is really sad.
So I was reading, this is a strange little fact. I was reading about where the broomsticks came from, how witches ride broomsticks. And it actually dates back to the early 1400s when they would take different herbs and they would create what's called a tropane alkaloid hallucinogen. It was kind of something for them to get high off of, but it also was used as an ointment or a salve, and that the way that they would administer it was vaginally or rectally, because it would surpass the liver and it would not create digestive issues. So how would they do that? They would use a broom to do that.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah,
I never heard that.
Which is weird, right? But that image of a woman on a broomstick actually dates back to that. So if that wants to misconstrue your Halloween.
Well, I did not expect this conversation to go there, Tanya.
But that's just the weirdness of how someone can take something and turn it,
Okay. Well, I just learned something new tonight. I think I just got to. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Yes.
Hey, working in healthcare, that's not a big deal for me. That's really not a big deal for me.
Oh my gosh. I just lost my whole train of thought on that one. So thank you, Tanya. Thank you.
I thought I'd say that in the last 5 minutes.
Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh. This time has been flying by the way. Yeah. Well, okay. So we were talking about the European witch trials. And all of that. It crept over here to America. Okay. And I do have some pictures of some of these trials. These are some artist renditions of what was going on there. And let me tell y'all, this was very dramatic, very dramatic, very traumatic, very dramatic. I mean, this was a modern day soap opera, basically, where a lot of people died. So, yeah, it was interesting, Tanya, that all of the books and the records on this incident, on this whole Salem witch trial time, this era, they were all ordered to be burned and thrown away. Okay, so there wasn't a whole lot of evidence that this even happened. Okay, they did not even mark off the spot where these people were executed, where they were hung.
Yeah, I was reading that where a lot of them where the trials were, there's a Walgreens there now, which I thought was kind of random because I just recently watched Hocus Pocus 2, and they go to a Walgreens like in the movie, and that movie is all about finding children and eating them, and it was just like, oh my goodness, so there is definitely a Hollywood theme when it comes to witches. And, of course, the devil aspect, but also the children, finding the children and, wanting to eat them. So it's like, okay, obviously that was started in Hollywood to break into our subconscious mind, and into our psyche to make us believe that that's what witches truly are. But like we talked about earlier, it's really just connecting to the earth, and being one, one with nature.
Yeah, it's actually really sad. It's so convoluted and twisted a little bit because these people were devout Christians who were being accused of being witches. But then, your remote viewing data came back with the loosh. And that's what some people say, the reptilians. And, I did a show about that this week too. About the
oh, that's right. Yeah, you did.
Yeah, I did. And actually that's one of the 2 videos that I've done. 2 live shows that YouTube has actually flagged as with those Wikipedia things where they want to put the context behind it. And the other one was the moon landing video.
Interesting.
So they wanted to make sure that we didn't get reptilian humanoids out of context.
Interesting.
Which is really weird, right? Out of all the things that we talk about, they're worried about misconstruing what a reptilian humanoid is. So yeah, right. I'm like,
you think if it wasn't a legit point, then why would they care?
Why would they even care? Exactly. Maybe because I said the Queen of England might have been one.
Well,
I said I didn't know for sure though. I was just saying that's what people say. So,
Could have been a witch too.
yeah, but it's interesting that it's stuff like that gets flagged,
Mhm.
why? Well, and we're talking about the loosh, and that is the energy that some of these entities live off of, and it's the sadness, the pain, the desperation, the frustration, all the bad energy that pain and suffering causes. That's what I'd say they're ancient energies here that are feeding off of that.
Absolutely. And I mean, you look back at our history between the wars and the massacres and the witch trials, all these things that created fear and just chaos, they're feeding off of that, and who's to say, obviously they're still doing it now, they're still continuing to feed off of the fear and,
Yeah.
and that's how they were doing it back then. Now we have ways they can do it through the television, where back then, they had to do it in the town. They had to create the ripple effect within the village, where people live.
That's right. They did because that's why I get really worried about my television and the shows that we watch, and all that negativity coming into my house. Got to be really careful about that. Oh my gosh, you guys, we have so many people in the chat. I'm so sorry. I have not gotten to all these comments. We only have 2 minutes left, Tanya. So I'm trying to figure out, do we want to keep going tonight a little bit, or do we want to cut it in 2 minutes?
I don't know. I mean, is there anything else that anyone wants to hear about? I mean, that's pretty much my data that I got, and based off of, after I received my data, the research that I did too. So
yeah, well, mine was all in a nutshell. Mine, in the nutshell, it was that this was just a big witch hunt, literally, and there were no actual witches involved, and it was just a bunch. It was basically innocent people being murdered and executed. Now, today in Salem, Tanya, I know you said you had been there when you were in high school, but today I actually looked up what's going on there, and of course, the whole town is just all about the Salem witch trials.
They're profiting
the
off
witches.
Of it,
yeah. Well, just like with any kind of cryptid, like the Bishopville lizard man. I mean, their whole town's about lizard man, and Hanabi is all about, Bigfoot and, all that kind of stuff. So they're profiting off of it. There's nothing wrong with that. It brings the crowd in, and hopefully people learn the real history behind all this, and they know it. And I think there's plenty of shows out on television right now that are giving the real history behind this. And so, they're even having Halloween Salem witch balls tonight. I mean, masquerades and movie nights, and they do make it fun. Okay. They do.
And I know they've had several paranormal teams go out there too, to do investigations. And I know that they have helped clear and release some of those spirits, and, and that's really what it is the more we tell stories about these locations, the more it holds these earthbound spirits here. So if we can help release them, then we can help clear the land as well.
Yes. Well, I think that's important that we do that. And I think that the fact that we can just talk about this, it really heals a lot of the energy that's involved in this, in these trials, because this was I don't want to say just a stain on the history here, but it was really rough, and it was unnecessary, what happened there. But yeah, in the spirit of Halloween, I'm glad that we got to discuss this tonight, Tanya. Where can people find you, Tanya?
Yeah, definitely. So I do quantum healing, hypnosis, EFT tapping, and the emotion code. You can find me on my website at www.thesoulcafe.org. I actually, on the Existential Empath podcast on YouTube and all podcast platforms, I actually recently, about 2 weeks ago, did a light language healing specifically for the Salem witch trials. So if any of you feel like you are connected to those witch trials and you're into the light language, then check out that video.
Yeah, please do, everybody. And also, everyone, I am running a promo code in my shop, War Woman Goods. I sell vintage Native American jewelry, super high vibe jewelry. It's all cleansed, and it comes to you in a great energy. Okay. But use the promo code Halloween. It's good through the weekend. And you guys, all my viewers get a discount. So please, you guys, use that. And so, Tanya, thank you so much for joining me tonight and for remote viewing this with me. This has been a blast. It really has been fun. So
it has been fun. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. Well, I hope you have a wonderful Halloween, Tanya. I want the audience, you guys, please come join me this weekend. Tomorrow night, I'm going to have the horror Chronicles podcast, JT and Ryan on Spaced Out Radio. We're going to talk about some crazy, weird Halloween movies and stuff. And then on Sunday night, I have Dennis Carroll coming in to talk about reanimated corpses and voodoo and all sorts of zombie stuff. So, and grave robbers. Okay. So y'all come join me. It's going to be a weekend full of Halloween spookiness. So, all right. Well, thank you again, Tanya. And everybody, I'm sorry if I didn't get to all your comments tonight. We just had a lot to talk about. And I will see you guys tomorrow night. Everybody, have a great night. And Tanya, thank you again. We'll see y'all soon.